Cinema is the great illusion of the modern age. We sit in the darkened comfort of a theater or the quiet solitude of our homes, surrendering our senses to a carefully constructed reality that unfolds across a screen. We are programmed to see the hero rising from the ashes, the lover meeting their fate, or the survivor conquering their fear, and in that surrender, we find the core of why we love movies. We are buying into a pact of trust, believing that what we see on screen is a manifestation of creative triumph, where every fall is choreographed, every tear is scripted, and every peril is managed with the precision of a professional craft. We applaud the stunt, we weep for the tragedy, and we leave the experience enriched by the story. Yet there is a boundary, a thin, almost invisible membrane that separates the audience from the truth of what occurred behind the lens. We have been conditioned to see the finished product as a seamless, magical entity, disconnected from the physical labor, the human cost, and the often terrifying reality of its creation. We look for the performance, never suspecting that in many instances, the performance is not merely an act of mimicry or a display of technical prowess, but a raw, unfiltered record of genuine human suffering. There is a darker, subterranean history etched into the celluloid of Hollywood, a collection of moments where the machinery of filmmaking failed, where the safety of the individual was sacrificed at the altar of artistic ambition, and where the line between fiction and a harrowing, real-life trauma was completely erased. These are the moments that persist in the shadows of cinema, forgotten by the gloss of the marketing campaigns and the celebration of awards seasons. They are stories of negligence, of demands pushed to the absolute breaking point, and of a system that often prioritizes the integrity of a single shot over the physical and psychological well-being of the human beings tasked with executing it. It is a sobering realization to acknowledge that some of our most beloved memories, the sequences that define our childhoods or the thrillers that kept us on the edge of our seats, are in fact the results of environments that were fundamentally broken or dangerously indifferent to the lives of those involved. If you find yourself drawn to these stories, if you feel a compulsion to understand the true cost behind the art you consume, and if you believe that the people behind the craft deserve to have their real experiences acknowledged rather than buried, then we invite you to continue on this journey with us. By choosing to subscribe to our channel, you are helping us maintain a space where these difficult truths are surfaced, where the history of the industry is examined with the gravity it requires, and where we refuse to gloss over the darker chapters of cinematic production. Your support is what allows us to dig into the archives, to synthesize the testimonies of those who lived through these trials, and to keep the conversation alive. We are pulling back the curtain on the industry, and we would value your presence as we navigate the complex, often unsettling intersection of human resilience and the relentless, sometimes merciless, nature of movie production. As we begin to peel back the layers of this history, we must start by recognizing that the disconnect between what we witness as viewers and what transpired in the moments of filming can be profoundly disturbing. We are not just talking about accidents. We are talking about moments where the human spirit was tested in ways that were never intended by the script. Take, for instance, the case of Isla Fisher in the production of Now You See Me. The film was designed to be a high-energy, slick thriller, a spectacle of stage magic and impossible escapes, but for the actress, one of the most pivotal moments of the film became a nightmare of isolation. During the filming of a crucial water tank escape sequence, the illusion of danger gave way to a terrifying, authentic reality. Fisher was tasked with performing a stunt that involved being submerged, but when a chain mechanism malfunctioned and left her trapped beneath the surface, the carefully calibrated safety protocols of the set seemingly dissolved. In the muffled, panic silence of the tank, she struggled, banging against the reinforced glass, signals of true distress being misinterpreted by the crew as part of a high-quality, convincing performance. It is a chilling irony that her acting was, in that moment, too good for her own survival. The very people whose duty it was to protect her were, instead, applauding her commitment to the craft. She later recounted the experience with a sense of lingering disbelief, noting that everyone on set assumed she was merely acting fabulously, completely blind to the fact that she was legitimately gasping for air and fighting for her life. This serves as a haunting reminder of the psychological distance that can exist on a film set, where the mandate for a realistic visual often overrides the reality of the human being responsible for creating that visual. Similarly, the industry was shaken to its core by the events involving Dylan O'Brien during the production of The Maze Runner, The Death Cure. What started as a standard day of filming filled with the usual logistical hurdles, descended into a catastrophe that fundamentally altered the trajectory of a young career. O'Brien was strapped into a harness on a moving vehicle, a setup meant to capture the kinetic energy and desperate urgency of the scene. However, a technical malfunction, a failure of the coordination between the vehicle's movement and the stunt rigging, led to a situation where he was violently yanked from his position and slammed into an oncoming vehicle. The injuries were severe: a concussion, facial fractures, deep lacerations, and significant brain trauma. The production, which had been moving forward with the typical momentum of a blockbuster franchise, came to an abrupt, screeching halt. The silence that followed was not just a pause in the schedule, it was a period of forced introspection for the entire industry. O'Brien withdrew from the public eye, embarking on a long, arduous road to recovery, and when he finally spoke about the incident, his words resonated with a painful clarity. He described it as a life-changing event, one that forced him to view the dynamics of film sets through an entirely different lens. He spoke of the commonplace culture where young actors are expected to be compliant, to be controlled, and to be viewed as difficult if they dare to voice concerns about their safety. His testimony serves as a stark indictment of a power structure that can strip an individual of their autonomy and safety in the name of the work. The narrative of broken trust continues with the tragic experience of David Holmes, a man whose life was dedicated to the craft of physical performance in the Harry Potter series. As Daniel Radcliffe's longtime stunt double, Holmes was an integral part of the world-building that captivated millions, executing the complex maneuvers that brought the magic of the wizarding world to life. But during a rehearsal for a flying sequence, the illusion was shattered in the most visceral way imaginable. Holmes was pulled backward with immense force, intended to simulate the physics of a magical impact, but the stunt resulted in him slamming into a wall and suffering a catastrophic neck injury that left him paralyzed from the chest down. The transition from the high-flying spectacle of the screen to the reality of a hospital room was instantaneous and permanent. Years later, through the documentary David Holmes, The Boy Who Lived, his story was brought to the forefront, not as a cautionary tale of production failure, but as a testament to human resilience in the face of life-altering devastation. Holmes recalled being fully conscious during the immediate aftermath, knowing with a terrifying, instantaneous certainty that his life had changed forever the moment he struck the wall. These stories, while distinct in their circumstances, share a disturbing commonality. They all involve the collision between the high-stakes, high-pressure world of professional filmmaking and the fragile, unpredictable nature of human biology. They force us to look past the glitz and the glamour and confront the reality that for some, the price of entertainment is paid in a currency far more expensive than any budget could ever account for. The legacy of cinematic trauma is not confined to physical impacts or mechanical failures. Often, it is woven into the very fabric of a performance through psychological endurance. The distinction between a director pushing an artist for greatness and a director subjecting an individual to sustained emotional distress is a line that has been blurred throughout the history of Hollywood. A primary example of this profound strain is found in the creation of Stanley Kubrick's psychological masterpiece, The Shining, specifically regarding the performance of Shelley Duvall. To the audience, her portrayal of Wendy Torrance is a masterclass in raw, unadulterated terror, a frantic, weeping, hyperventilating woman trapped in an isolated hotel with a fracturing reality. However, the truth behind that performance reveals a grueling production schedule that took an immense physical and emotional toll. Duvall spent months in a state of manufactured panic required by the director to cry for hours on end, scream until her throat was raw, and sustain an unnatural state of absolute terror day after day. The infamous baseball bat sequence on the stairs, which has become an iconic piece of cinematic history, reportedly required an astonishing 127 takes to satisfy the director's exacting vision. The sheer repetition of that level of high-stakes emotion is not something the human body or mind can easily process as an illusion. Duvall later reflected on this creative marathon, explaining that after a prolonged period, the physical body naturally begins to rebel against the continuous trauma of forced sorrow, crying out for the duress to stop. The mere anticipation of having to enter that state of despair was sometimes enough to trigger genuine tears, trapping her in a cycle of exhausting anxiety. Her ability to survive that production and deliver a performance of such enduring power remains a testament to her personal fortitude, yet it leaves a lingering question about the ethical boundaries of artistic extraction. This manipulation of an actor's true emotional vulnerability reached an even more controversial peak in the production of Last Tango in Paris, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and starring Marlon Brando alongside a young Maria Schneider. The film, celebrated in certain circles as a groundbreaking exploration of human intimacy and degradation, harbors one of the most ethically compromised stories in movie history. Schneider was aware that she would be participating in a simulated, highly intense assault sequence, but the specific, infamous details of the scene were intentionally withheld from her until the very moment the cameras began to roll. Bertolucci later confessed that he and Brando colluded to keep her in the dark because he desired an authentic, unvarnished reaction from her, not as an actress executing a script, but as a young woman experiencing an unexpected humiliation. This deliberate withholding of consent and information shattered the professional boundary that is supposed to protect an actor on set. Schneider spent the remainder of her life dealing with the emotional fallout of that day, stating that she felt deeply humiliated and violated by both her co-star and her director. The tears she wept on camera were entirely real, born of a genuine sense of betrayal that no artistic achievement can ever justify. The finished film captures a moment of real human degradation, disguised as a provocative piece of avant-garde cinema. Moving from the gritty realism of European art houses to the pristine, golden age of family entertainment, we find that even our most cherished childhood comfort films are built upon a foundation of severe hazard. The Wizard of Oz is a monument of cinematic joy, a vibrant musical escape that has delighted generations of children. Yet the history of its production reads less like a fairy tale and more like an industrial nightmare. The magical scene where Dorothy and her companions fall asleep in a beautiful field of poppies was brought to life by showering the actors in a thick blanket of fake snow, which historical records indicate was composed of pure asbestos, a substance now known to cause fatal respiratory illness. The physical dangers extended directly to the cast's daily transformations. Buddy Ebsen, originally cast as the Tin Man, was rushed to the hospital and placed in an iron lung after suffering a near-fatal systemic reaction to the aluminum dust used in his makeup, forcing the studio to replace him. Margaret Hamilton, portraying the Wicked Witch of the West, suffered severe second- and third-degree burns on her face and hands when a hidden trapdoor mechanism failed during a fiery pyrotechnic exit, leaving her to heal for weeks before returning to the set under the threat of replacement. Most devastating, however, was the treatment of Judy Garland, who was a mere 16 years old during the grueling shoot. The young actress was subjected to a system of total control, slapped by her director to curb a fit of giggles, put on a strict regimen of amphetamines to maintain her energy through endless shooting hours, given barbiturates to force sleep at night, and forced to endure alleged instances of physical harassment from older actors on the set. Her youth and vulnerability were weaponized against her, creating a pattern of substance dependency and emotional scarring that would haunt her for the rest of her short life. The contrast between the bright, technicolor optimism of Oz and the bleak reality experienced by its young star is a profound reminder of the historical exploitation that underpinned the old studio system. This pattern of pushing individuals into environments of extreme physical distress continued into the modern era of high-tech filmmaking, as seen in James Cameron's ambitious underwater epic, The Abyss. The production was notorious for its logistical complexity, requiring the cast to spend weeks submerged in a massive converted nuclear reactor containment tank filled with millions of gallons of water. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio found themselves pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. Harris experienced a harrowing near-drowning incident when his air supply malfunctioned while he was deep underwater, a moment of true panic that left him shaken. Mastrantonio's experience during a pivotal resuscitation sequence was equally grueling. She was required to lie soaked, freezing, and exposed on a cold floor for hours while Harris's character repeatedly compressed her chest and slapped her face across countless takes. The physical and psychological intensity eventually caused a breaking point, leading the actress to declare that they were not animals before walking off the set in defiance of the relentless environment. The film succeeded in capturing the claustrophobia and terror of the deep, but it did so by turning its cast into psychological guinea pigs. The ultimate consequence of production negligence, however, is not injury or distress, but the tragic loss of human life. The disaster on the set of Twilight Zone. The movie remains Hollywood's most somber cautionary tale regarding the catastrophic failure of safety protocols. During a complex nighttime sequence involving heavy pyrotechnics and a low-flying helicopter, A massive explosion damaged the aircraft's tail rotor, causing it to spin out of control and crash into the performance area. The accident instantly claimed the lives of actor Vic Morrow and two young child actors, Mika Dinla and Renee Shin-Yi Chen. The tragedy was compounded by the subsequent revelation that the children had been hired covertly, in direct violation of child labor laws designed to prevent minors from working in hazardous conditions at night. The legal fallout lasted for years, exposing a culture of corner-cutting and safety compromises that sent shockwaves through the industry. It forced a massive reevaluation of how stunts are coordinated, how child actors are protected, and who bears ultimate responsibility when a creative vision turns fatal. For Morrow's daughter, Jennifer Jason Leigh, who was just beginning to find her own footing in Hollywood, the loss was a devastating personal cross to bear amidst the public scrutiny of an industry-wide trial. The fragility of life on a film set was further highlighted by George Clooney's harrowing experience during the filming of the political thriller Syriana. While executing a violent, physically demanding torture scene, Clooney sustained a severe spinal injury that went far beyond a typical on-set mishap. The trauma was so acute that it caused cerebrospinal fluid to literally leak from his nasal passages, leaving him trapped in a state of unremitting, agonizing physical pain. The sheer intensity of the suffering was so overwhelming during his long recovery period that the actor later admitted to contemplating suicide, unable to envision a life defined by such constant, debilitating torment. The finished film carries a heavy, somber atmosphere, but for those who know the history, that weight is not just a narrative choice. It is the shadow of a man who looked into the abyss of his own survival while trying to fulfill the demands of his character. These historical accounts demonstrate that the illusions of cinema are frequently paid for with the tangible suffering of those who inhabit the frame, leaving a permanent mark on the history of the art form. The history of cinema is littered with instances where the relentless pursuit of realism crossed the line into absolute cruelty, leaving lasting scars on those who survived the experience. Tippi Hedren's time on the set of Alfred Hitchcock's thriller The Bird stands as one of the most notorious examples of a director transforming a closed set into a chamber of personal torment. Hedren had been led to believe that mechanical prop birds would be utilized for the terrifying attic attack sequence, a reasonable assumption given the technology of the era. Instead, she arrived on set to discover that cages of live wild gulls and ravens had been assembled, and for 5 grueling days, crew members threw these panicked animals directly at her, some even tying the birds to her wardrobe with nylon threads. The terror on her face in that sequence is not an exhibition of theatrical skill, it is the raw panic of a human being under physical assault, culminating in a moment where a bird clawed dangerously close to her eye, leaving her fractured and exhausted. Hitchcock's behavior went far beyond the boundaries of aggressive directing, bleeding into a toxic, obsessive pattern of sexual harassment and professional threats that Hedren would later chronicle in her memoirs. Decades later, her daughter Melanie Griffith and granddaughter Dakota Johnson would navigate the same industry, carrying the generational memory of a matriarch who had to fight for her basic dignity against a powerful creator who threatened to destroy her career because she refused to submit to his perversions. Griffith herself would face a terrifying trial of her own during the production of Roar, a film directed by her stepfather Noel Marshall that has been widely categorized as the most dangerous movie project ever executed. Filmed with over 100 untamed lions, tigers, and cheetahs, the production lacked basic safety parameters or expert handlers, resulting in over 70 documented injuries to the cast and crew. Griffith was brutally mauled by a lioness, requiring extensive facial reconstruction surgery and leaving her with injuries that easily could have cost her sight or her life. It was an environment of pure chaos, driven by an unhinged belief that nature could be directed like an actor, proving that sometimes Hollywood's ambition can border on actual madness. This willingness to gamble with human flesh for the sake of a striking visual manifests in lighter films as well, proving that no genre is completely immune to negligence. Channing Tatum's experience on the set of the historical drama The Eagle remains a uniquely painful story of production oversight. While filming in an icy hypothermic river, the crew sought to keep the actor warm by pouring a mixture of boiling water and river water down his insulated wetsuit between takes. In a moment of absolute carelessness, a crew member poured undiluted, boiling water directly down the suit, causing severe, agonizing burns to Tatum's most sensitive anatomy. The actor found himself hyperventilating and screaming in a state of pure panic, leaping back into the freezing river to stop the burning. trapped in a terrifying medical emergency that highlighted how easily a routine safety measure can turn into a disaster when basic attention to detail is abandoned. A similar breakdown of mechanical safety occurred on the set of The Exorcist, where teenage actress Linda Blair was subjected to physical trauma that would impact her health for the rest of her life. During the iconic bedroom possession scenes, the specialized mechanical rig designed to violently thrash her body back and forth malfunctioned, shaking her with far more force than her skeletal structure could bear. As she screamed and wept in actual agony, fracturing her lower spine, the production crew continued filming, mistaking her genuine cries of pain for a magnificent, visceral performance. The footage of her actual spinal injury remains preserved in the final cut of the film, a sobering realization for anyone who revisits that classic horror masterpiece. The deception behind the scenes can also take a deeply macabre turn, as JoBeth Williams discovered after completing the memorable swimming pool sequence in the supernatural horror hit Poltergeist. Oblivious to the reality of her environment, Williams spent hours crawling through a muddy trench filled with human skeletons, assuming they were constructed from plastic or rubber by the art department. It was only after the film's release that she discovered the production company had purchased real human skeletons, because they were less expensive to acquire than high-quality medical props. An ethically bizarre decision that left the actress deeply disgusted and added a layer of authentic grimness to the film's lasting legacy. This disregard for the comfort and safety of performers was echoed by Uma Thurman's harrowing experience on the set of Kill Bill, an event that remained hidden from the public for 15 years until the actual footage of a catastrophic car crash surfaced. Thurman had expressed deep reservations about driving a mechanically unreliable vehicle down a dirt road, requesting a stunt double instead, but director Quentin Tarantino dismissed her anxieties, demanding she perform the sequence herself. The vehicle veered off course, slamming violently into a tree, and leaving Thurman with crushed knees, a concussion, and permanent spinal damage, an incident she later characterized as an unforgivable cover-up by the studio. Even in massive, critically acclaimed blockbusters like Titanic, the romanticism of the narrative is built upon a foundation of severe physical hardship. Kate Winslet spent weeks filming in freezing water tanks without a protective wetsuit, ultimately contracting hypothermia and nearly drowning when her heavy coat became snagged on a submerged grating. The chaotic nature of that production reached a bizarre, hallucinatory peak when a large portion of the cast and crew were hospitalized after eating a batch of clam chowder that had been maliciously spiked with the hallucinogenic drug PCP by an unidentified individual. An unsolved mystery that turned a high-pressure Hollywood set into a scene of mass medical delirium. Yet none of these stories carry the profound, heartbreaking tragedy of Judith Barcy, the brilliant young voices actress who brought the beloved characters of Ducky in The Land Before Time and Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven to life. At just 10 years old, after enduring years of horrific physical and emotional abuse from her father, Judith and her mother were murdered by him in a domestic double homicide-suicide just months before her breakout films were released to worldwide audiences. The tragedy cast a devastating shadow over the animated classics, particularly during the production of All Dogs Go to Heaven, where co-star Burt Reynolds reportedly struggled to record his final emotional farewell lines to her character, breaking down repeatedly in a closed recording studio as he grieved the loss of a child whose future was stolen by real-world darkness. The hazardous nature of film sets can also invite moments of near-fatal coincidence, such as the split-second reaction that saved Tom Cruise's life during the filming of The Last Samurai. While executing a mounted sword fight against Hiroyuki Sanada, a mechanical horse malfunctioned, placing Cruise directly in the path of Sanada's descending steel katana. Only Sanada's elite martial arts training and extraordinary physical reflexes allowed him to halt the momentum of his blade a mere inch from Cruise's throat, narrowly avoiding an actual on-camera decapitation. Other productions seem haunted by environmental dangers that loom over the entire cast long after the camera stopped rolling, as seen in the infamous Legacy of the Conqueror. Filmed in the desert plains of Utah directly downwind from a United States military nuclear testing facility in Nevada, the entire production area was heavily contaminated with radioactive fallout. Over the following decades, an alarming, statistically anomalous percentage of the cast and crew, including icon John Wayne and director Dick Powell, developed fatal cancers, transforming a poorly received historical epic into a grim monument to environmental negligence. The line between performance and survival was similarly blurred for Michael J. Fox on the set of Back to the Future Part 3 during a dramatic hanging sequence. In an effort to make the stunt look more realistic, Fox agreed to perform the scene without a protective safety box beneath his feet, miscalculating the placement of his hands around the rope. He found himself actually hanging, his carotid artery completely compressed, causing him to lose consciousness and swing helplessly at the end of the rope for several seconds before director Robert Zemeckis realized that his choking was no longer an act. This relentless physical toll defined Jim Caviezel's portrayal of Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, a shoot so intensely demanding that it nearly claimed his life, leaving him with hypothermia, pneumonia, a dislocated shoulder, and the miraculous misfortune of being struck by lightning on set, ultimately requiring 2 separate open-heart operations to correct the damage inflicted on his body. The supernatural thriller The Omen became so thoroughly associated with catastrophic coincidences, including planes struck by lightning, unhinged animal attacks, and a fatal car crash involving the special effects designer that mirrored an iconic decapitation from the script, that many involved genuinely believed the project was cursed by a higher power. From the disturbing use of real funeral footage in Bruce Lee's final, stitched-together feature Game of Death, to the rotting biohazardous animal intestines that actor Joe Pilato was forced to perform alongside in Day of the Dead, to the unproven but deeply unsettling allegations of animal cruelty that have clouded the reputation of the childhood classic, The Adventures of Milo and Otis, Hollywood's history is inextricably bound to these dark realities. These narratives force us to look past the pristine digital illusions of the screen and confront a heavy truth that behind the magic of our favorite cinematic stories lies a complex, fragile world where human beings have bled, suffered, and sacrificed everything to capture a single moment of fleeting perfection.